A hidden ledger of online deceit is now on the record shoe. This file ranks the top 10 African women convicted in the U.S. internet scams, with or without extradition, by proven loss amounts. This ranking uses court records, Interpol notices, UNODC, Transparency International indexes, IMF data sets, World Bank Stolen Asset Recovery, known as STAR, and verified investigative journalism from ICIJ. Each entry is scored against 10 universal criteria with gaps clearly stated. Now, the evidence. The expose narrator leads us into the record, Pollard, official filings, asset trails, and verified documents. Thank you, Dr. Komla. Today, we go on record 10 African women convicted in U.S. online fraud, traced through FBI case files and cross-border extraditions. They mastered phishing. The court brought a bigger net. As their two-factor failed, the second factor was handcuffs.
Disclaimer. This crime index and manhunt file is not just a list. It is a warning. Crime does not end in profit. It ends in warrants, arrest, extradition, prosecution, conviction, and asset forfeiture. Empires fall. Records remain. The top 10 on the list is Florence Mwende Musau, Kenya, wire fraud conspiracy. Case spotlight. A quiet account in Boston began to pulse with deposits. Victims believed in love and partnership. Cash outs and transfers followed. Federal agents traced the pattern across messages, banks, and withdrawals. The scheme ended in a courtroom. A sentence followed. Identity. She is Kenyan. Birth year not stated in public filings. The jurisdiction was the District of Massachusetts. She is a convicted defendant in a federal case. Snapshot, indicators, and status. The scheme used romance scripts and false investment claims. Proceeds moved through local accounts. The loss figure sat below $1 million. The case showed organized roles and repeated typologies. Federal visibility was sustained. Investigative detail. Agents documented nearly 10 bank accounts opened in Greater Boston. She used fake passports and multiple aliases to open those accounts. About $1 million flowed through those accounts during the scheme. Large cash withdrawals were structured below $10,000 to evade banking alerts. Some deposits came from pandemic unemployment benefits obtained with stolen identities. The charge covered a multi-year conspiracy that used romance scripts and false investments. She entered a guilty plea in federal court. The court ordered restitution of $957,000. The court ordered the forfeiture of a Lexus sport utility vehicle and additional balances. Homeland Security Investigations, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Postal Inspection Service supported the case. Financial trace and beneficial ownership map. Victim funds were wired into United States bank accounts. The accounts were opened and controlled by the ring. Some proceeds were withdrawn in cash. Some proceeds were wired to other accounts. Some corridors reached West Africa. No public filing identified any formal trust. No public filing identified any nominee company. Mules and facilitators held first receiver accounts. Mission recap. Arrest and initial appearance occurred in Massachusetts. A guilty plea followed. Judgment and sentencing concluded the case. The statutory maximum for the conspiracy count was 20 years in federal prison. The court balanced loss amounts and roles. The sentence included prison time and restitution enforcement. National context. The United States hosts a large online use. Romance scam exposure remains high. Kenyan connections appear in several cases. Cooperation frameworks include mutual legal assistance.
Asset recovery and sanction status. Restitution collection is ongoing. No sanctions listing is recorded in public notices for this defendant. Asset recovery relies on payment plans and seizure of traceable proceeds. Gap clarifier. The public docket does not list every downstream receiver. Full beneficial ownership of foreign endpoints is incomplete. The top 9 on the list is Sherlin Sims, Zimbabwe, money laundering conspiracy. Case spotlight. A Georgia jury viewed bank statements and testimonies. The pattern was clear. Incoming wires from lonely victims, rapid cash-outs, layered transfers. The verdict closed the loop. Identity. She is Zimbabwean. Birth year not stated in public filings. The jurisdiction was the Northern District of Georgia. She is a convicted defendant after a jury trial. Snapshot. Indicators and status. The enterprise blended romance, lies, and business email compromise. The funds exceeded $1 million US. The ring used multiple banks. Roles were split across recruiters and account holders. Federal visibility was high during the trial. Investigatory detail. Prosecutors proved that she registered a sham company named Grace Trading. She opened business accounts for that company at JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America. 2 days after registration, the accounts began receiving victim wires. About $200,000 landed soon after those accounts were opened. She wired proceeds to China and to other foreign destinations. She made cash withdrawals and rapid transfers to reduce traceability. Banks closed the accounts, and she then opened new accounts in the same sham name. One incident diverted a home purchase earnest money transfer of nearly $100,000 US. Over 7 months, more than $1.2 million in fraud proceeds moved through her controlled accounts. She also used the sham business to obtain a fraudulent pandemic relief loan. Mission recap. An arrest followed the investigation. Trial concluded with a conviction. Sentencing followed. The statutory range for the conspiracy count carried up to 20 years in federal prison. The court imposed a custodial term. The court retained restitution jurisdiction. National context. Atlanta hosts busy financial corridors. The region has significant wire transfer activity. Zimbabwean connections in this case reflect diaspora links rather than state support. Cooperation remained within standard judicial channels. Asset recovery and sanction status. Restitution is in place. Seizures targeted balances in known accounts. No sanctions listing is recorded in public notices for this defendant. Gap clarifier. The verdict confirms the laundering figure. The precise list of foreign final beneficiaries remains unclear.
The top 8 on the list is Mona Faiz Montrage, Ghana, conspiracy to receive stolen money. Case spotlight. A public persona masked a private pipeline. The arrest in London created a pause. Extradition followed. New York prosecutors unsealed the file. The image shifted from glamour to records. Identity. She is Ghanaian. Birth year not stated in public filings. The jurisdiction was the Southern District of New York. She is a convicted defendant following a guilty plea. She arrived after extradition from the United Kingdom. Snapshot, indicators, and status. The enterprise used romance scripts and advance fee lies. The United States accounts received funds from older victims. Transfers moved from New York to West Africa. Federal visibility was intense. Media coverage amplified the deterrence message. Investigative detail. Investigators tied her to about 40 romance fraud victims. She received transfers after lies about gold shipments and a fake federal investigation. She also used a story about a fake United States Army officer in Afghanistan. She used her real name with one victim during phone calls. She sent that victim a tribal marriage certificate to build trust. That victim sent 82 wire transfers totaling nearly $100,000 US. She controlled Bronx bank accounts that received over $2 million US in fraud proceeds. She was arrested in the United Kingdom on 10th November 2022. She was extradited to the United States on 12th May 2023. She pled guilty on 21st February 2024 and agreed to forfeiture and restitution of $2.165 million US. She was sentenced on 28th June 2024 to 12 months and 1 day. At sentencing, the court ordered restitution of $1.387 million and forfeiture of $216,475. Financial trace and beneficial ownership map. Victim wires entered Bronx accounts. The accounts were controlled by the defendant. Proceeds moved to Ghanaian endpoints. Some transfers used correspondent banks. No public filing identified a formal shell company. The chain relied on personal accounts and mule networks. The corridor was United States to Ghana. Mission recap. The arrest occurred in the United Kingdom. Extradition delivered the defendant to New York. A guilty plea was entered on a set date. Sentencing followed with custody and financial orders. The statutory maximum on the count was 5 years in federal prison. The court set supervised release after custody. National context. Ghana has strong air links with Europe and the United States. That access raises exposure to cross-border fraud rings. Cooperation with the United States uses extradition treaties and legal assistance processes. Asset recovery and sanctions status. Forfeiture and restitution orders are in force. The collection depends on assets located in the United States and Ghana. No sanctions listing is recorded in public notices for this defendant. Gap clarifier. Downstream receivers were not fully identified in public filings. Recovery hinges on cooperation by co-conspirators and banks. The next 4 names show command roles and multi-state wiring corridors.
The top 7 on the list is Eima Okoro, Nigeria. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering. Case spotlight. Messages promised love and partnership. Elderly victims moved their savings. Accounts in Texas and beyond received the wires. Agents followed the pattern of deposits, cash outs, and relays. A jury saw the ledgers and the chats. The verdict closed loop. Identity. She is Nigerian. The jurisdiction was the Northern District of Texas. She is a convicted defendant after a federal trial. Snapshot, indicators, and status. Losses reached about $2.2 million. Multiple banks and payment channels were used. Roles were split between recruiters, openers, and pushers. The ring operated across several states. Federal visibility was sustained through allied task forces. Investigative detail. The conspiracy used dating platforms and scripted pretexts. Promises included investments and emergency costs. Victim wires landed in first receiver accounts. The first receivers were money mules who moved funds onward. Cash withdrawals were structured to avoid reporting triggers. International relays included corridors into West Africa. The court credited evidence from phones, laptops, and bank KYC files. Restitution was set near $2.2 million. The sentence reflected role, loss, and guideline factors. Financial trace and beneficial ownership map. Entity fronts included small trading names and newly formed LLCs. Beneficial control sat with inner circle handlers. Nominees held signature authority on several accounts. Transfers moved from consumer banks to fintech wallets. Some proceeds crossed into correspondent channels for onward credits. No formal trust deeds were identified in public filings. Mission recap. Indictment named wire fraud and money laundering conspiracy counts. Trial concluded with guilty verdicts. Judgment entered with prison and restitution orders. The statutory maximum exposure for each core count was 20 years in federal prison. National context. Dallas and Houston are busy wire corridors. Nigerian diaspora ties can enable rapid account openings. Uptake of digital wallets increases movement speed. Cooperation relies on mutual legal assistance and bank subpoenas. Gap clarifier. Downstream foreign beneficiaries are not fully listed. Collection depends on the mule cooperation and the bank's responses. The top 6 on the list is Sally Eriri, Nigeria, wire fraud conspiracy. Case spotlight. Romance script began with careful grooming. Victims believed they were helping a partner. Wires and cashier's checks followed the lies. Wisconsin agents mapped the receipts to mule accounts. A federal judge later weighed the losses and the harm. Identity. She is Nigerian. The jurisdiction was the Western District of Wisconsin. She is a convicted defendant after a guilty plea. Snapshot, indicators and status. Losses exceeded $2.3 million. The ring used mail, wires, and bank-to-bank transfers. Members coordinated across several states. The pattern showed training, scripts, and repeatable plays.
Investigative detail. Investigators reviewed phone extractions and telegram logs. They matched chats with bank timestamps. They identified the purchase of gift cards as a cash-out method. They recorded structured withdrawals under the reporting thresholds. They tied deposits to romance lies and fake investment returns. She entered a plea to the lead conspiracy count. The court imposed a 10-year custodial sentence. Restitution covered the full confirmed losses. Financial trace and beneficial ownership map. Accounts were opened with nominee signers. A small network of LLCs served as fronts. First receiver accounts split transfers into rapid relays. Some funds exited through money service businesses. Some funds moved to West African endpoints. The core beneficial controllers stayed insulated from direct receipt. Mission recap. Arrest followed a multi-agency probe. Guilty plea entered in federal court. Judgment imposed prison, supervision, and restitution. The statutory maximum for wire fraud conspiracy was 20 years in federal prison. National context. Wisconsin cases often pivot on postal evidence and bank alerts. Diaspora networks can extend reach beyond state lines. Judicial coordination with other districts improves recovery chances. Asset recovery and sanction status. Restitution orders are active. Forfeiture targeted seized balances and devices. No sanctions listings are public for this defendant. Gap clarifier. Foreign relay accounts remain partly unidentified. Asset location outside the United States limits immediate recovery. The top 5 on the list is Deborah Mensah, Ghana, money laundering conspiracy. Case spotlight. An arrest in Accra began the handover. She was placed on a flight to New York. The extradition sealed a major node in a West African enterprise. Victims were elderly and corporate staff. Emails and romance scripts created the cover for wires. Identity. She is Ghanaian. The jurisdiction was the Southern District of New York. She is a convicted defendant after a guilty plea. She arrived through extradition from Ghana. Snapshot. Indicators and status. Scheme losses exceeded $10 million. The enterprise combined business email compromise and romance fraud. Accounts in New York served as transit hubs. Roles were formalized across recruiters, openers, movers, and closers. Federal visibility was intense due to cross-border reach. Investigative detail. Agents traced spoofed vendor emails tied to corporate inbox takeovers. They captured mule instructions and supervisory chat logs. They mapped batch wires into clustered New York accounts. They identified secondary relays in Ghana and nearby states. She pleaded guilty to a money laundering conspiracy. The court imposed a prison term and supervised release. The court ordered forfeiture authority and restitution. Her extradition timeline was documented in the case file. Financial trace and beneficial ownership map. Front entities included import and consulting names. Signers rotated to reduce exposure.
Beneficial control sat with ring coordinators outside the United States. Correspondent banks enabled dollar clearing into non-United States institutions. No public filing listed a formal trust instrument.
Mission recap. The arrest occurred in Ghana. Extradition delivered her to New York. A guilty plea secured a conviction. Sentencing set custody and financial penalties. Each core conspiracy count carried up to 20 years in federal prison. National context. Ghana is a regional air hub with fast access to the United States and Europe. Joint work with United States agents improves arrest and extradition outcomes. Banking reforms focus on KYC and suspicious activity reporting. Asset recovery and sanction status. Restitution collection is ongoing. Forfeiture seeks balances in reachable accounts. No sanctions listing is recorded in public notices for this defendant. Gap clarifier. Some correspondent endpoints remain opaque. Downstream controllers are only partially identified. The top 4 on the list is Benedicta Atakare, Nigeria, wire fraud and money laundering conspiracies. Case spotlight. A multi-defendant Texas ring ran layered plays, romance lies mixed with vendor payment diversions. The docket showed years of wiring corridors and scripted cash-outs. Her role is linked to large relays and account control. Identity. She is Nigerian. The jurisdiction was the Eastern District of Texas. She is a convicted defendant after a federal adjudication within the ring. Snapshot, indicators, and status. Losses in the conspiracy were at least $17 million. The enterprise used dozens of accounts. It spanned several states and international legs. Training notes and playbooks existed within the group. The case drew sustained federal attention. Investigative detail. Evidence included 314A requests to banks. It included SAR narratives from compliance teams. It included seized phones with mule rosters and payment scripts. She coordinated first receiver and second receiver transitions. She used shell LLCs with short operating histories. She recycled corporate names that mimicked real vendors. She used overnight wires to collapse investigative windows. The record placed her inside high-value relays. The court weighed her role enhancement at sentencing. Financial trace and beneficial ownership map. Shells claimed consulting and logistics activity. Nominee signers opened business accounts in multiple states. Correspondent channels facilitated dollar clearing to foreign institutions. Cash couriers handled small off-book movements. Beneficial owners remained within a closed inner circle. Books and records were sparse and transactional. Mission recap. The indictment charged wire fraud and money laundering conspiracies. Arrests rolled out across several states. Plea and trial outcomes varied across co-defendants. Judgments imposed long prison terms and heavy restitution. Each core conspiracy count carried up to 20 years in federal prison. National context. Texas remains a major corridor for international wires. Banks in the region see frequent BEC attempts. Task force models help unify parallel investigations. Asset recovery and sanction status. Restitution is active under the judgment. Forfeiture includes account balances and seized electronics. No sanctions listing is recorded in public notices for this defendant. Gap clarifier. Several foreign receiver accounts remain unidentified. Civil recovery against shell entities is still pending in related files. Surprised by the placements? The top 3 will challenge assumptions about secrecy versus records. If you track the gaps and the recoveries, you will see why.
The final twist opens this tier. The last 3 names tighten the pattern. Command roles, cross-state wiring, long sentences that signal leadership. The top 3 on the list is Linda MB Madong, Ghana. Money laundering conspiracy. Case spotlight. Virginia investigators saw romance claims turn into wires. Incoming deposits landed in Northern Virginia. Cash-outs and relays fanned across nearby states. The trail led back to a small circle with steady access to accounts. Identity. She is Ghanaian. The jurisdiction was a United States District Court in Virginia. She is a convicted defendant in a federal case. Snapshot, indicators, and status. Losses reached at least $500,000. The ring mixed romance lies with vendor-style diversions. Multiple accounts, rapid relays, and cash withdrawals signaled an organization. Federal visibility rose after a bank filing triggered attention. Investigative detail. Agents linked her to the first receiver accounts for victim wires. She used newly registered business names with no real trade. She opened accounts with quick in-person visits to branches. Withdrawals were structured below $10,000 to reduce alerts. She moved funds to co-conspirators on the same day as deposits. Phone records showed scripted replies sent to victims. USB drives seized at arrest held bank credentials and mule rosters. Compliance reports described pattern matches to known romance typologies. She entered a guilty plea after indictment. Restitution reflected documented losses across the known victims. Financial trace and beneficial ownership map. Fronts included consulting and logistics names. Nominees held signature authority on key accounts. Relays moved through correspondent channels for faster settlement. No formal trust deeds appeared in the public record. Beneficial controllers remained inside a small inner group. Mission recap. Arrest followed a multi-agency probe. A guilty plea secured a conviction. Judgment imposed prison time and restitution. The wire fraud conspiracy statute carries up to 20 years in federal prison. National context. Northern Virginia hosts dense banking and payment rails. Proximity to Washington strengthens investigative capacity. Diaspora links ease the onboarding of new account openers. Asset recovery and sanction status. Restitution is active under the judgment. Forfeiture targeted balances and devices. No sanctions listing is recorded in public notices for this defendant. Gap clarifier. Foreign endpoints remain partly unidentified. Additional recoveries depend on cooperation from mules and banks.
The top two on the list is Suna Sapetu, Tanzania, conspiracy to launder wire fraud proceeds. Case spotlight. A New England jury heard about false lovers and urgent bills. They saw bank trails that started in small towns. They ended in layered accounts under thin business covers. The verdict confirmed the pattern. Identity. She is Tanzanian. The jurisdiction was a United States District Court in New England. She is a convicted defendant after a jury trial. Snapshot, indicators, and status. Restitution approached $1 million. The ring used banks, money service businesses, and fintech wallets. Several victims were elderly. Law enforcement tracked structured cash-outs and fast relays. Investigative detail. Evidence included seized phones with romance scripts. It included bank KYC files, teller notes, and time-stamped withdrawals. It included chat logs that matched deposit times. It included packaging slips for mailed cash and gift cards. She handled first receiver accounts and immediate splits. She recycled corporate names to mimic real vendors. She moved funds to out-of-state mules within 24 hours. Account closures triggered quick openings at different institutions. Jury instructions covered knowledge of proceeds and intent to conceal. The court entered judgment and set restitution near $921,000. Financial trace and beneficial ownership map. Fronts posed as trading and services firms. Nominees held signature control.
Relays crossed through correspondent banks for dollar clearing. No trust structures appeared in the file. Ultimate controllers remained insulated from direct receipt. Mission recap. Arrest followed a joint federal and local investigation. Trial produced guilty verdicts on laundering conspiracy. Sentencing imposed a custodial term and restitution. The statutory maximum for the count was 20 years in federal prison. National context. New England banks flagged repeated romance typologies. Postal inspectors aided evidence collection. Regional task forces coordinated subpoenas and interviews. Asset recovery and sanction status. Restitution orders are active. Seizures covered reachable balances and devices. No sanctions listing is recorded in public notices for this defendant. Gap clarifier. Several downstream accounts remain unidentified. Cross-border recoveries are still contingent on foreign responses. The top one on the list is Sandra Iribhogbe Popnen, Nigeria. Wire fraud and money laundering conspiracies. Case Spotlight. A Texas enterprise blended romance, lies, and business email diversions. It moved money across many states. It pushed proceeds into fast relays and quiet cash-outs. Her role sat near the core. Identity. She is Nigerian. The jurisdiction was the Eastern District of Texas. She is a convicted defendant in a multi-defendant federal case.
Snapshot, indicators, and status. Losses in the conspiracy were at least $17 million. The network used dozens of accounts. It relied on trained openers, movers, and closers. Law enforcement documented command-level coordination. Investigative detail. Seized phones held mule rosters and account scripts. Chats showed role assignments for daily pickups. Bank filings described clustering of victims by day and by branch. Funds moved from first receivers to second receivers within hours. Shell companies matched recycled names and short operating histories. Correspondent banks cleared dollar transfers into foreign institutions. Searchers recovered counterfeit identification kits. Device forensics pulled credential spreadsheets and template emails. Sentencing memoranda emphasized leadership features and high loss. A long custodial sentence followed. Financial trace and beneficial ownership map. Shells posed as consulting, logistics, and import firms. Nominees rotated to mask sustained control. Cash couriers handled off-book sweeps under $5,000. A small inner circle held beneficial control across several entities. Books were thin and transactional. Mission recap. Indictment charged wire fraud and money laundering conspiracies. Arrests rolled out across several states. Plea and trial outcomes varied across defendants. Judgments imposed long prison terms and heavy restitution. Each core conspiracy statute carried up to 20 years in federal prison. National context. Texas remains a major wiring corridor with high BEC exposure. Task force models improved the speed of arrests and searches. Banks increased alert rules for romance typologies. Asset recovery and sanction status. Restitution collection is active under the judgment. Forfeiture pursued balances, devices, and high-value items. No sanctions listing is recorded in public notices for this defendant. Gap clarifier. Several foreign receivers are still unidentified. Civil recovery against shell entities remains open. This rank holds due to scale, documented command traits, and sentence length. Facts protect the public. Records deter crime. Exposure ends the myth of easy money. If this file helped you, tap like now. Subscribe to receive the next ranked investigation. Turn on notifications so you do not miss arrests or recoveries. Leave one comment with 2 lines. First line, the single tactic you believe investigators should scale next. Second line,
Write the words, "Check the money" if you want faster asset recovery. Your comment pushes this warning to more viewers. Add a respectful correction if you have a verifiable update. We will review and update the record. We support due process and fair trials in every jurisdiction. We stand for transparency and lawful recovery.